Most of you don't know me, but I have spent my whole career in the offshore industry. I've worked literally all over the world, and I want to say, this is a fun race, but it is the longest race in the Gulf of Mexico, and it survived, I think, partly because it's a fun race, and we want it to be fun. But those of you that remember, not that long ago, at the very end of the race, conditions changed, and it became very, very treacherous, and there were some accidents. And so, I'm in the offshore industry. Encore Dredging is my company. We dredge so that ships can go up and down the navigable waterways of the United States. Things change in a hurry. And so we do need to be ever aware of our situation. And I know the Coast Guard is going to talk about that in just a few minutes. So with that, I'll make a little introduction. We have Lieutenant Mike Clancy, is a native of the Philadelphia area. He's a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. Completed a tourist deck watch officer in the Coast Guard cutter Raymond Evans in Key West, Florida, prior to entering the Navy Flight School. African all over that. Okay. He is currently 2 years into his first pilot assignment at Air Station Houston. So we welcome him, and a little hand for him. We also have Commander Robert Cole, Waterways Management and Facilities Division Chief at the Coast Guard Sector Houston Galveston. Prior tours include Coast Guard Pacific Area, Sector San Diego, Sector Mobile, and previously Sector Houston Galveston. He obviously moved here because he preferred Houston, whether it was San Diego. Today it's pretty convincing. Otherwise, 2 weeks ago, I don't know. He's a graduate of the University of Southern Carolina, and prior U.S. Navy officer. Last but not least, Captain Jason Smith. I'll go ahead and get it. He'll be later.
Captain Smith is tied up at the 9/11 event this morning. He's going to be here probably about 11:30.
Okay, I'll wait that introduction for later. But otherwise, gentlemen.
Morning, everybody. Going to apologize to start. Public speaking is not really my thing, so this is probably the biggest group I've ever spoken to, so I do apologize if there's a lot of fillers and stuff in there. But I'll kind of start off with a little bit of an overview about the Coast Guard and what our goals are in search and rescue. We'll talk about how to try to prevent this image, and then a little bit if you do find yourself in a situation where one of our helicopters is out there working with you. What to expect and some of the ways you can help us out to make it a little bit easier and a little bit safer to get yourself out of that situation. So here's just a big picture of what the Coast Guard's doing. Essentially, we've split up the entire U.S. coast into a series of districts and sectors. So right here, you're working primarily with the Coast Guard sector, Houston Galveston, the Coast Guard's 8th district. But it's good to know that when you're talking to somebody on the radio, they might be telling you Houston Galveston, but if you sail further east, you might hear New Orleans. But regardless, you should get the same kind of service from any of these Coast Guard sectors, regardless of where you're sailing. And they will always be monitoring Channel 16 for you. This is just kind of a basic overview of what we have in terms of assets and who could be responding to you. There really are a lot of different Coast Guard assets. Different assets might be better for the situation you're in. And then just a little bit of a breakdown on the personnel. Obviously, a lot of active duty personnel. I think it's roughly 40 to 50,000 people they talk about. So they always use the analogy to the New York Police Department. We're basically covering the whole U.S. coast with about the same number of people. And then we also have civilian employees, reservists, and then we have auxiliary as well. I don't know if anybody here works with auxiliary or whatever, but that's an opportunity to get involved. You know, if you do have a personal vessel or something like that, you just want to help out, because search and rescue really is as many bodies as you can get involved. Helps to make those cases have a better outcome. And then assets, yeah, we have cutters, which is what basically we call a large ship, ranging from, I think the largest ones we have are 419 feet long, and then working all the way down to our patrol boats or whatever. And then we also have Coast Guard small boat stations throughout the area. I think there's one down in Port Aransas where you guys are going, and then obviously in Galveston, Houston Ship Channel. So all sorts of assets, and then most importantly we have the helicopters and fixed wing aircraft or whatever. So in this area, you're most likely going to see the Dolphin 65, the orange helicopter. And then if you go further east towards New Orleans, they have the Jayhawks, and Corpus has 65s, and then that 144 in the top right corner, the fixed wing aircraft. That's just an overview of what you can expect to see from us. I'm just going to click through a bunch of these because I hate when they pull them up one at a time. This is really talking about how do you get a hold of us if you're in a situation. Kind of like on that off, we're always monitoring Channel 16. There's always somebody over at the sector in Galveston, Houston, right over there at Arlington Field, is listening on Channel 16 and should be able to respond to any call you have. And then, additionally, there's, it seems like everybody here has a pretty good idea of, the equipment you can use to set yourself up for success if you do find yourself in an unfortunate situation. So we would, obviously advocate for having, e-perms on board, and then the DSC with the distress feature on there as well. And then kind of a big caveat, I haven't, worked in the sectors and stuff as much playing SAR response, but if you go through the trouble to buy that equipment, maybe also take the next step and make sure it's registered to you and has the appropriate contact information. I know sometimes, we'll get the hit on the e-perm, great, it's registered, they'll call the number and then find out that it's registered to the previous owner of the boat, and that doesn't do a whole lot for us. But I will say, from the SAR responding unit as a helicopter or whatever, this stuff is, especially those e-perms and the personal locator beacons, those are really valuable equipment. We've had people accidentally activate them, which it happens, nobody's upset about it. And then, 30 minutes later, we're overhead and we're like, what happened? Oh no, we dropped our e-perm, but at least it works, So they will get us where we need to go, so it's definitely worth the investment. I know it do cost a little bit of money, but you can search and find all sorts of stories online about how those how that little extra money can help you out in a pinch. We actually had a case not too long ago, sailboat, e-perm activated, and we lowered the swimmer, we were able to pull some people off a sinking sailboat. So it's definitely something to look into. We also put up there, use the phone. Obviously, that's not going to be our primary method, but I wouldn't tell you to not use the phone if that's what you have. Your radio's broken, whatever. Use whatever tools you have available to you. We're using cellular internet when we can, when we're flying around. Ideally, we'll use radio or whatever, but whatever you have that's available to you, use it. Just know that phone is probably not the quickest way to get a hold of us, but if that's what you have to do, that's what you have. And then they threw in their AIS or whatever. That's not really what that's meant for. But again, if you want to put a message on your AIS and you're having an issue, maybe somebody sees it. But that's not going to get you that instantaneous response that you may need. Email and text, obviously, not the best option. There is this National Command Center number, so if you just need a number to put in your phone, and maybe you sail around a lot of places, so keeping the second Houston Galveston phone number, but you're sailing to Mobile or you're sailing to Florida or something like that. These guys are always there, and they'll have the numbers to those outlying units as well to get you in contact with who they need to. This is just kind of a real quick diagram of what's going on and how information is getting relayed around. So as you can see, you have your vessels, private vessels, Coast Guard, the aircraft. We're all transmitting back to, now that they have the Rescue 21 network, it's basically what we call our series of high sight towers, so those tall towers you see there, they're relaying everything along the coast to us offshore. So it gives a pretty good capability, and then it's all kind of being run out of a Coast Guard center in Martinsburg, West Virginia. So basically just showing kind of the interaction between all of the different players out there on the water, and we really do have some pretty good capabilities in terms of communicating with people now. Now kind of talking about, and this is not 100% my area of expertise, the guys who are really good at the SAR planning are the people who work at the sectors. A lot of times I'm really just responding to what they put into the computer, but I do have a rough idea and can answer some questions on it. Basically, this is how they're going to plan a case if the vessel's overdue or there's some signs of distress or whatever. They're going to use this program called SAR-Ops, which is basically just a geospatial intelligence system, which takes into account all these parameters to build the best search pattern and basically put together what is the most likely place for the vessel to be if it does come to a certain situation. But as much information as they can put into it, you get a better result and a higher level of confidence of where they would be. And like we were talking about earlier with EPIRBs and things like that, the goal would be to take the search out of search and rescue, especially as a helicopter pilot. I search because I have to, but I like to rescue. So it's a lot easier if we already know where you are, or we can expect where you're going to be. I know in the previous presentation they were talking about letting people know if you're going to alter your plans or whatever, if you're going on the ICW instead of staying on shore and stuff like that. So those float plans are a big part of that too. They can kind of plot out where they expected you to be. And if you've gone overdue, the first thing we're probably going to do is fly along that float plan that you've left with somebody on shore. And that way, if it is just the engine's out or something like that, hopefully you're sitting somewhere along where we expect you to be, and it makes the searching a lot easier. And like anything else, the preparation you put in ahead of time before you get underway can go a long way in reducing some of the pain when you find yourself in these situations. This is just kind of basically the output you get from that SAR-Ops system. So they take all those environmental factors, where they expect you to be and all that type of stuff, and it comes out with a probability of where they expect you to be, and then those black lines there, they're going to work and put together a search pattern for either us or a surface asset or something like that to fly along and try to give us the best coverage of the highest probability of where a missing vessel or person would be. This is just a real quick diagram of what's happening with the EPIRBs. Obviously, you activate them; they're highly reliable. I gave you that example of us flying over accidental activations and everything like that. And another plug for the making sure it's registered with up-to-date contact information. Also worth noting, as we're flying around the helicopter, and I know for a lot of the larger ships and stuff as well, we have direction finding equipment. So if you have one of these 406 or the EPIRBs going off, we'll be able to kind of track where that signal's coming from. And that's what we do in a lot of these cases. We'll pull up a direction finder, gives us a needle every time it makes a transmission and it points in the direction of it. So that allows us to kind of hone ourselves in as well. So it's just one more thing to help us out there. Another plug for EPIRBs. This slide's really just talking about if you do find yourself in a situation where you need to contact the Coast Guard, what are some of the things you can kind of front load them with to help out with our response and get you guys a better product on your end. So if it is a Mayday situation, the Mayday, that really helps to kind of get the attention of the person sitting there listening to the radio. And then, everything from there is pretty much information they would like to be putting into that SAR-Ops system that we show on the slide. So the position, course of speed, nature of distress, number of people on board, all of that's going to help with the response planning. Obviously knowing that sometimes you may not have the time to give as much information. So as much as you can get while still safely, either evacuating your vessel or whatever the case may be. But as much information as you can pass over to the Coast Guard, it really does help with the search planning, especially for us in the helicopter world or whatever. If you give us how many people and things like that. We have to plan for that type of stuff in terms of weight and fuel planning and how far and everything. So as much information as you can safely pass is greatly appreciated. And then this next slide is really telling you what you can expect the Coast Guard to be pulling from you, and it's a lot of that same information. You can see it's talking about number of people, whether or not you have life jackets. I assume everybody in this room understands the importance of life jackets or whatever. It's really unfortunate when that becomes a limiting factor in some of these cases. On-scene conditions, that's directly SAR ops, so they can plug that in there and then as well give us a heads up on what to expect when we arrive on scene, and then more information, anything that can amplify, and then when they talk down there about the vessel briefing with the aircraft or whatever, that's depending on your situation. If it's a medical situation, the boat's fine, whatever. We may give you some instructions on how we'd like to steer your boat. And that's really just to work with winds and things like that to help us out to make it a little bit easier and safer if we do have to medevac someone off your vessel. But we'll make those instructions pretty clear, when the time comes. This is just some stuff that if you go through basic survival courses or whatever, that they're telling you to think about if you are going to make that decision to basically evacuate your vessel. Making sure you're wearing the appropriate equipment. Around here, it's not the water's not super cold all the time, but if you are in a colder environment, maybe invest in some of that survival suits and things of that nature. Obviously, make sure you're donning them. We were talking about the other day, obviously I pitched EPIRBs, but there's also the personal locator beacons, which is basically a personal version of that. If you have those for all your survival suits as well, that's just another way for us to find you. And then also considerations would be, maybe don't activate them all at the same time. Save the battery on those. So if you have the EPIRB going, maybe one PLB at the same time, but consider considerations for that. But the EPIRB, I think, is supposed to have 48 hours. There's supposed to be a pretty good battery on it, but it's just one more thing to think about. We were just talking about that the other day in the office. And then these are kind of, if you do find yourselves in sort of prolonged waiting situation, those are just kind of steps you can go through. Recognize you're in trouble, look at what you have, what's going to be available to you to help you out. Shelter is a possibility if you have a life raft or something like that. That would be something to look into. Food and water, they talk about rationing of food in the first 24 hours, or water in the first 24 hours and those types of things. So just kind of those considerations. There's all sorts of information online about that, or you can watch Survivor Man or something like that on the Discovery Channel for more information on that. So this is kind of getting more into, we get as far as the helicopters out there coming to help you, what you can expect. And a lot of this will be fairly transparent to you, but it's good to just kind of have an idea of what it is. But this one will be a big one, the trail line. All this is really there for is to help us as pilots basically pinpoint, drop whether it's a basket or a pump or something to you, while also maintaining good visuals. So we'll basically put this line down to you. And if we haven't already lowered the swimmer to you, they'll probably be coming next. But either way, the big thing is when we put that to you, they're going to ask you to pull around on it and just keep it tight. And what that'll do is allow us to kind of back off a little bit as a helicopter. We can see the boat down below us. And then kind of, you're just pulling the hook or the basket or whatever right down to your boat while we're kind of maintaining a little bit of an angle there so we can see. And then it also does have basically a breakaway there, so if something comes up and we have to pull away, it's just going to break a small cord. There'll be no damage there. So we like using those a lot, especially when it's a little bit rougher out and stuff like that. It gives us a chance to back away and have better visuals while we're doing some of these more difficult hoists. We do, if we get the call, so again, if you're passing this information through sector, you're taking on water, that would definitely be something to let them know. We do have the ability to carry dewatering pumps. And there's all the metrics on what it can do for you. But the big thing is we're not always carrying these. We are really kind of weight limited, especially in the 65 community or whatever. So if you're in a situation where you think you're going to need a dewatering pump, probably throw that one out to sector. They should be asking about it, but we'll have to know to throw one in the helicopter, which is something we can do. But it would be, unfortunate we get out there we should have brought the pump. So that's just an option there. Really, two ways we'll bring that down to. Either we'll hoist it direct, or we have a method where we'll give you the trail line, tie the trail line off to the pump, and then kind of just throw the pump out the side. And then inside that box is obviously the pump, some instructions, and like most of these things, if we're going to give you something, the next thing that's coming is most likely going to be a rescue swimmer who's trained to operate this. So the biggest thing there, your biggest load will probably be just helping him pull it back up onto the vessel, because they can be just a little bit heavy to pull out of the water. But all the instructions will be in there if we don't, for whatever reason, alarm rescue swimmer take it. It's kind of like IKEA instructions, a lot of pictures and things like that. So it should be pretty easy to use. I haven't used one in a few years, but I say that, I don't know if I can get it started, but it's not much more different than a lawnmower. This would be the primary tool we're going to use if we're looking to actually pull somebody off the boat or out of the water. It's really just the easiest way for the swimmer and the mechanic to get you guys up into the helicopter. Again, swimmer's going to come down, he's going to explain how to get in there, but it really is as simple as it looks. Just like that guy sitting there, arms and legs inside the right vehicle and all that type of stuff. And it does float, so if you get in there, it's not just going to sink on you or whatever, but really they'll just they'll put you in there and pull you up. The litter, most likely if you're going in this, you're not going to do much. They're just going to put you in there. You're non-ambulatory is what we're using these for again. So this is largely our medevac type of situation. And again, information to pass the sector. We have a guy who's not doing well. We don't always carry the litter as well. We always have a basket on board. We always have the slings drop, but the litter, again, is something we have to kind of know ahead of time to bring. Again, not a big deal to bring it, but if you can pass that information, it helps us to make that decision. Sling and strap, to most people, they're just going to look about the same, and you really don't need to do anything with that. I wouldn't worry too much about it. This will be something the rescue swimmer will use if it makes sense for him to use it. It's just a little bit quicker than the basket and things of that nature. This is the one, I apologize, there's some animations on this. But this is basically what it looks like when they use that equipment. And then they mentioned physical grip down there. Again, you'll know when it happens to you. That's more just for relocating somebody. We're not pulling people up 50 feet in the air. Physical grip would be more like there's a predator or something like that. We're just going to pull you 15 to 20 feet away, and he will just be holding on to you. But again, he's just going to do it, and you're going to go along for the ride. So I wouldn't worry too much about that one. These are just a little bit more. A lot of this is what you'll see from the fixed-wing aircraft. I do get this question a lot, kind of what do fixed-wing Coast Guard aircraft do? And they do a lot of the search and rescue, and then they also have the ability to drop this type of equipment to you, so they can drop the water pumps, life rafts, DMBs, which are basically going to mark positions and things like that. A lot of that information feeds directly into SAR Ops as well. But that's kind of what they're doing for you. And often, if you're really far offshore, they're actually the first people you're going to be talking to. They'll get out ahead of us. They'll give you that vessel briefing, tell you what to expect when that helicopter arrives, because they are just a little bit quicker than us. They also have a little more endurance, so they'll probably be overhead for a large portion of the evolution. This is more just if you have a chance type of things, kind of what we're dealing with up there. Especially a lot of people here are sailors or whatever, on sailboats. So that mast can be kind of difficult for us when we're hoisting. So sailboats are definitely a trail line type of hoist. So you can expect that trail line. If it's really rough and we can't get the trail line on, there's a chance after getting the swimmer to you, they may need you to evacuate the boat with them. And it'll be easier to hoist from the water. But again, there'll be a swimmer. There's all sorts of YouTube videos. Those guys are really good at what they do. They can help you out if it comes to that. But just knowing that, if you're on a sailboat, stripping boat, something like that with a lot of mass, it can be difficult to get a hoist directly to you on the vessel, especially kind of in a situation like that. I don't think that's not one of our helicopters, but the point's made. Those masts swing around a lot. And then the other pictures kind of telling you at night pilots certainly, probably the guys in the back, maybe wearing night vision goggles. and different lights. Most light is not compatible with that, so if we arrive overhead and somebody hits a flare or something like that, it's just going to be a big white light in our goggles. So obviously use flares if you need them. If we haven't acknowledged that we see you or something like that, you got to get our attention one way or the other. Just kind of knowing if you flash a light or shoot a flare off right off by the helicopter, that can be a little bit difficult for us, might disorient us for a second. So those would be like kind of the two things that become a challenge for us working with other people. And then obviously, talking about a lot of the search and rescue stuff is just passing as much information as you safely can in those initial calls with the sector on 16, or whether it's registering refurb or anything like that. But as much information as we can have before we step foot to the helicopter, that really does just help and go a long way. Any questions? I know I might have been a little long-winded. Yes, sir.
Is there an issue with you all being able to see LED lights?
There is a little bit. So kind of, this is actually a thing with big radio towers and stuff like that. A lot of them are transitioning towards LED lights. And we're just kind of, sometimes they don't show at all on night vision goggles. Sometimes they show just fine. Sometimes it's kind of just a weak image. So we've really kind of changed our scan to look out the side of the goggles. They really only cover a small portion. So it's kind of hit or miss with LED, and that is kind of one of the concerns. LED is not always as good on night vision goggles to see it, which I guess in some ways is good if you're not getting bloomed out, but some of those radio towers would be really nice. Those we'd like to see bright. So occasionally LED could be a problem for the night vision goggles, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The DSC and the EPIRB, is there a particular time you would use one rather than the other?
If there
Can you repeat the question, please?
So I believe this question was, is there a scenario that would be better for an EPIRB versus a DSC call? I can't think of a real distinction. I would think you would use what you have available to you. Unless I don't know if you've done more smart planning, Rob. No. So yeah, I would say whatever you have. I know a lot of the EPIRBs have kind of the automatic activation or whatever, so if you forget, at least that's a backup. But yeah, if it makes sense to do both, I would try to get as much out, as much information passed as early as possible. Any other questions?
On the same vein, what about the distance for VHF and PCS? What would we expect? It's typically told it's like 25 miles, but
So I'm not a technical expert on DSC. I know a lot of it kind of depends on who's around because it's relaying that message. So I guess if you're lucky and there just happens to be enough boats within that range, you could get the message a lot further. But I know, kind of going back to EPIRB, that's satellite, so you're more likely to get a better range on that. But I couldn't give you, or I wouldn't want to quote an exact range on the DSC for you to give you some bad information there. I appreciate it, guys. Rob?
Is it just next?
Yeah, just next. Just the
Just go
right
down,
one,
yeah.
the right, is that the one you're looking for?
Kind of like a full screen? Oh, it's there. Okay. Well, just to underscore everybody, I did attend the University of South Carolina, the first USC, real USC, not the University of Southern California. So, this is going to be real quick. Mr. Brinkman asked because of amount of dredging that's going on in the Houston Ship Channel in general. We have 10 dredge projects all along the Houston Ship Channel, so a lot's going on. The one in particular that concern was expressed about was Project 11, so we'll talk about that. That's down at the ICW and Bolivar Roads, what you guys should expect to see when you're heading south. Then a little thing, some information on virtual aid time, kind of what you should expect to see if you have your charting configured to see those aids. And then kind of echo a couple things that Michael said from our command center on some safety notes. So Project 11, that's the Houston Ship Channel Deepening and Widening Project. They're currently down in the lower bay. You can see that black image with the trailing pipeline there just below Bolivar Roads. That's where we expect the Dredge Carolina to be when you guys head out in early October. Right now they're blocking that upper alternate inbound tug and barge route that goes north. But you don't need to worry about that. When you go out in October, you should see them down there on the red side, dredging that portion of the channel. And then they'll move to the upper bay, up near Bayport later on, well after your guys' event. The dredge itself is the Carolina. They're monitoring channels 0, 6, and 13, so if you're able to do that when you're in the vicinity, you should be able to hear their communications, and then you should be able to hail them on those channels if you have any kind of difficulty making passing arrangements or anything like that. And they have workboats always there. They're kind of churning in and out, but right now it's the Miss Becky and the Miss Carolyn, some tugs that are assisting them. And then kind of some Coast Guard measures that we're going to take. We will have a patrol commander the day you guys take off towards Corpus on the 6th. It'll be stationed Galveston, and they'll have a boat just offshore where you guys are congregating and heading west for the start of the race. Station Freeport, which is to the west as well, they're aware of your guys' event, and they'll be monitoring, and you may see them out there as you guys pass Freeport as you head towards Corpus Christi. And then we do this every year between Sector Houston-Galveston and Sector Corpus Christi. We'll talk with their Waterways Management Division, that's my division and my counterpart there. And your sponsor does submit a marine event application to them as well as to us. So we'll be coordinating and making sure we're aligned on your guys' event, any kind of safety concerns and questions. And we may have the sponsor be on there as well. We did that last year. It's good to kind of talk through things and just confirm that everything is as advertised. And then virtual ATON, so most of the aids to navigation, specifically lights up near kind of 54, 53, 52, and then buoys as you get more south towards the ICW. Those are largely gone right now because of the dredge project. Because we don't have a good, because they deepened and widened kind of that portion heading south, we can't mark it properly until the Army Corps surveys it, and then we'll put aids back on. But we do have virtual aids that have been lit. So if you guys have the proper equipment, charting and AIS display on your vessel, you should see those aids where they would normally be on your charting display. Many are not there, I underscore that. As you're heading south, you likely will not see many aids in those positions, but those AIS aids should help you navigate if necessary. As always, and you guys know this, we're preaching to the choir, use all available means to navigate. So visual, electronic, and radar, if you have that capability. And then the last item is kind of underscoring what Micah talked about, is safety. You can see our USCoastGuardVoting.org app there, kind of a screenshot to the right. If you don't have it, it's available just as a download on Apple and Google. It has flow plan information and things like that and resources you can utilize. But kind of underscoring Michael's comments from our command center, Channel 16, that's the primary circuit and conduit to contact for search and rescue issues or any other issues you might have and need Coast Guard assistance. And as he described, the command center is specifically looking for this kind of initial information from you guys. Position, lat long, number of persons on board, nature of distress, description of the vessel, things like that. So just kind of get that main initial information to kind of plan how we're going to respond to your situation. And then the website's there, USCoastGuardVoting.org. Any questions on dredging, aids to navigation that you might see as you head south, or any kind of safety concerns you might have? All right. Captain Smith will be here later. He's our second commander. He was in Corpus Christi during the event that was described earlier. I think it was 2018 or 2019 where the storm came and there were some issues with search and rescue. That spurred us coming to this safety day each year, kind of talk to you guys with a little better, closer coordination with the event sponsor, Coast Guard Sector Houston-Galveston, Corpus Christi. So he'll be here around 11:30, kind of give his perspective. He was the deputy sector commander there, kind of some issues and concerns and just some friendly advice and comments. So, pending your questions, I think that's all we have.
All right, thank you.